Hey everybody, Aaron with Fleetistics here, flying solo today. And today I'm going to be talking about implementing GPS technology in your fleet. There are 5 distinct steps that we've identified after doing this for 21 years, and we're going to talk about each one of those steps, kind of break it down a little bit. And hopefully you'll take some notes. If not, you can certainly visit our webpage that you see on your screen here. We'll also post the link down in the show notes. And if you like the content, hit like. Give us a like, subscribe. We're doing more of this type of informational video content for you, kind of talking off the cuff and just sharing what we've learned over the years, and hopefully create a better experience for you. So let's get started. Implementing technology is kind of this scary process, and we're not going to talk about installation in detail. We're not going to talk about addressing this with employees in detail. What we're going to talk about is the big picture plan and the steps in that plan. Obviously, planning starts, a plan starts with planning, and you are creating a plan for a project that is for the implementation portion of the rollout. Once you start going down the GPS tracking telematics road, then you are really on a life journey, because nothing should remain static. And the customers that cancel service are the ones that lose sight of why they got into this to begin with, and they're not really visionaries and looking forward to how do I keep continuous improvement in my organization and in my fleet. Things are changing very quickly, and when you lose the ability to monitor and track activities within your business, then you start to become outdated and irrelevant, because others are doing that and they're going to quickly surpass you. So let's talk about the 5 different steps in that process. The 5 steps overall include planning, installation, configuration, deployment, and measuring the progress. So in the planning phase, what we really need to do is identify one person to be in charge. Who is the leader of this project? And that person is the one that sets the meetings, ensures people follow through, interfaces with executive management, and oftentimes it's the owner. But if it's not the owner, who's in charge? And they're the ones that are responsible. By having a single point of contact responsible for this, you have a better chance of things staying organized, because when you have accountability that's spread over a group, nobody really, is the one that has to stay on top of it. They always assume somebody else is doing it, whatever. When you're identifying participants to be part of the GPS telematics program, you should be looking for people from all different segments of your business. This is not just about fleet. This is not just about safety. This includes legal, human resources, operations, sales, delivery, service. All of those different departments should have representation. If you're a government agency, think about anybody that could have value or gain value from the data that's going to be collected. Now, you may not be able to identify your participants without getting some general presentations from a couple different companies, so you can start to get a feel for the types of data that you're going to be able to get out of the technology, and then you want to reach out to the different departments. But if you have department heads in your organization, then it's a good idea to get the department head involved initially, and then they can reach into their department to assign someone to the GPS tracking telematics committee or project as their representative of their interests. The second thing is to establish the goals. What do you want to accomplish? At what point do you say that you have a viable solution to continue moving forward? If you cannot get to a certain level, then at that point you need to say, for whatever reason, your fleet is unique in this world and you will not benefit from making this particular investment. And at that point, it's a no-go criteria. But if you reach that, you know that you're going to have identified an acceptable level of ROI, that if you did nothing else but got to the lowest common variable or the lowest goal in this equation, that you would meet sufficient standards that it would justify the effort. So that's really the second part. And then the third part is the HR policies. What are you going to do when you start collecting the information? You get knowledge, and once you understand what you're seeing, you become responsible for the information that you're getting, right? This is a double-edged sword in some ways, that If you do nothing and you are collecting the data, then you're going to have a problem downstream. It's going to be someone's going to get fired and you didn't look at the data as it relates to other employees, or you're going to have an accident and you did nothing to curb the unwanted behaviors prior to, and you're going to, kind of get yourself in trouble. So the goal is to establish how far you are really willing to go to get what you want from a GPS tracking and telematics program. I got into this business actually in the mid 90s when I worked for a major national pest control company and brought the technology to that company, and they took it further. And what they did was they had very strict policies. They were dead serious about the information coming out of this, and I actually had one of my service managers fired because he got caught going like 90 miles an hour in a company truck, and there was a zero tolerance policy for that type of behavior. It was one instance over the speed limit by this much, and then if you crossed the line and you were here, it didn't matter if you were a division manager, you were out, right? They set down the rules before they rolled the technology out. So the standard was clear to everybody. Everybody signed off on a policy that said, hey, we are monitoring your vehicles, and these are the consequences for the behaviors that could lead to up to and including termination. And it really worked out well, because over 20 years of using GPS tracking, they actually have attributed $25 million annually in savings in risk mitigation alone. Right? Not even looking at productivity and operations and sales and all those areas, just risk mitigation. So if you're a bigger organization and you want to achieve those same types of results, you have to understand that, if you aren't willing to do something about the behaviors that you will see, then consequently your return on investment is going to be nominal. And you just need to face that fact. And you may even want to just say, you know what, we're not, as an organization, we're not culturally ready for that. We're just going to do nothing and we're going to be status quo. Hey, look, it's better than getting sued for, when you had knowledge of something and you did nothing about it. At least you could claim ignorance if that's your game plan. Not exactly a good business practice, but, I guess it's a viable course of action for some companies. So strong HR policy that everybody can get behind. No individual is bigger than the organization. No individual is more important than the organization. We certainly don't want to drive turnover. But at the end of the day, if everybody's informed of what the standard is and they choose not to adhere to the standard, who's really making the decision that they don't want to be there anymore? It's the employee, right? We want to coach to the behavior standards that you established. But if you cannot get someone in compliance, then that somebody needs to go work for somebody else, i.e. your competitor, hopefully. All right, the second portion or the phase of implementation is installation. And you've got some choices. Do you want to do it internally or do you want to hire professionals? We did another video on that, and we will link to that video right here. You can click that and watch that and get an idea of whether or not you should be considering doing self-installs. My general preference, for somebody that hasn't been through, the technology deployment process before, is have a professional installation company come in and just bang it out, right? We can teach you if you have your own mechanics. We'll be glad to train your staff to do the work. We'll be glad to train them to troubleshoot if you want to go down that road. But if you do not have that type of skill set within your organization, hiring a professional installation company will save you time and money in the long run. When you look at what you have to allocate towards payroll for someone to come in, perhaps after hours, on weekends, time and a half, all of that kind of stuff, they don't know what they're doing. They're twice as slow, 3 times as slow. Your vehicles might be out of service for a longer period of time, which means they're not producing revenue. All of those variables add up, and it's also a barrier to adoption by branch staff who typically already have too much to do. So if they think that they've got to actually take care of all this work, then they're going to be more resistant. If you say, hey, we're going to bring in a crew, they're going to come in starting Friday at 4 p.m. and they will be done with your branch by Monday morning at 6 a.m. and they're going to do all 50 vehicles over that time period, and all you got to do is make the vehicles available, then that's a much more much more accepted course of action for people that have to deal with the work themselves. So when you're doing this, certainly there needs to be a standard, and that's where you would involve the technology provider, which would be us, and have a meeting with the installation company, and those three parties need to come together and say, hey, what is the standard for this process? I want the units on a Y harness. I want them zip tied to the frame underneath the dash. I want to use serial number zip ties, and I need photos of the install so I know that it's done. And I need a written record of the device serial number and the vehicle's license plate number so I can match the two in the configuration step after the installation is done and confirmed, right? The next thing is you need to set a timeline. How many devices can get done over what period of time? What you don't want to do is take a shipment of 100 devices and you can only install 3 a day, right? You're going to start to get billed because typically those devices are showing up at your location, quote unquote, active, which means that we're getting billed. So consequently, you're getting billed. So by staggering the delivery of those devices, you can more efficiently reduce the impact on the branch and get the installations done, let's say over the course of 2 or 3 weekends, or at night, Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. until 3 a.m. or whatever the case is. That process becomes a lot smoother by understanding those things. Next is coordinating the vehicles. Where are the vehicles going to be? When are they going to be accessible? How are you going to get keys? Is there a gate? Is there somebody that will be there that will stay late and answer questions and make them accessible to the installation team? Can they meet on Friday and get the keys for all the vehicles? Are all the vehicles going to be lined up in order? If you line your vehicles up and the keys are on the seats, the installers can move through a lot of vehicles. I've seen one person actually do 50 installs in a single day on a weekend when everything is set up just right. And when you get that level of efficiency, it's something that gets done and you move on in your business. So talk to the installers and they will readily tell you what is the most conducive setup where they can come in and get the most work done in the shortest period of time efficiently, which gets you guys back to work and takes the interruption out of your business. We talked about the documentation. Oftentimes now that there's a mobile app that will capture that information and share it digitally, or at least get it to you in a spreadsheet, so then you can import it into the application and you can continue on with that. So installation is really a part that gets overlooked a lot, especially in RFPs. They say, oh, well, we want a quote on the price and install. Well, you haven't told us what's type of vehicle, what kind of harnesses are going to be needed. Do you have auxiliaries that need to be connected? There's a lot of things that go into that, and the more locations you have, the fewer the vehicles that can be done, the longer it takes per vehicle, the higher the price, and that's just the reality of it. But time is money in the install business. I mean, it's never truer than in that type of work. So I'm sure you appreciate that. Next is configuring the account. And there is a certain level of account configuration that should take place before the install starts, because as the installation is taking place, you want someone to be able to verify that the install was done in such a way that it actually shows up in the account. And if it doesn't show in the account, you might be getting some beeps and some lights out here that indicate that things are going well, but for whatever reason, it's not actually showing in the database. And let's say, that truck is scheduled for a delivery tomorrow, and you're going to be using the ELD that is coming along with the Telematics platform, and it's not confirmed that it's working, and then the truck's got to go, and now he's driving without ELD, or at least he has to go back to paper logs. And that just creates, turmoil and excuses for why people don't like the technology, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to make sure that the telematics provider, which would be like us, has that information in the account prior to install, and then that the installers have access to a mobile app, or better yet, there's going to be somebody from your organization that they'll be able to text and say, hey, do you see this one? Yep, I see it. Send the message back. or they can log into the mobile app. They get a user that gets added to your account for the installation process, and they can log in themselves and actually see that particular vehicle show up on the map, and they know at that point that that install is 100% correct and they've done their job right. The other thing about installers is if something goes wrong, they'll come back and fix their work. It's not like they don't warranty their work, but when you do so many of these day in and day out, GPS tracking and telematics devices are the easiest things to put in for these guys because they do literally thousands of them all the time. And it's not only doing new installs. When you turn over 10% of your fleet every year, they come back out and they'll move the units around if that's not something that you do. So you want to get the serial number of the GPS unit documented in relation to the vehicle, and that may be a VIN number, that might be a license plate number. However you do those things, that's really for you guys to decide. And then you want to go into the account and configure all of the things that are part of your initial goals, right? When you implement this technology, you don't want to have 27 goals. You want 1, 2, 3 goals that you can get to in relatively short order that give you that return on investment. And that might be something as simple as engine idle time. That's always the easiest one because you can run a report. It'll show you who's idling your vehicle, and you can walk straight to that person and say, hey, you need to shut it off. Understand it's warm out, but you can't be idling your truck for 45 minutes while you eat lunch. You need to go inside the restaurant and eat and not leave the vehicle running, because they don't think about the fact that over that period of time they just burn $3 worth of fuel, and then they do that 20 days a week. Now they're burning $60 a month in your fuel just so they can eat lunch in the car, let's say. Or maybe they're driving to another territory to meet up with their buddy that's on another route, and they're both crossing counties, driving 15, 20 miles each way to have lunch with somebody else. That's a waste of wages, and it's a waste of fuel. It's also putting your vehicle at risk for the additional miles being driven, et cetera, et cetera. You know the story. So having those types of things configured in the account in support of the goals that you have for your organization are important, and that's where we come in and sitting with you and working with you. It's part of that discovery process that we go through with you before the sale even begins. And then we have people that come in and help you with the training, the configuration, the dashboards, the reports, things like that. So the next part is the deployment piece. And you've got the account set up, you've got the devices showing in the account. Now you have to train people on how to actually log in. You have to train them on what you're looking for, what's the standard that you're looking for, what are the goals of the things that you're looking for early on in this process. And those goals are going to change over time. And people need to know, hey, look, for the first 3 months, this is what we're focusing on. Once we see that that goal is being attained, then we want you to maintain that standard, but then as an organization, we're going to move on to A, B, and C, right? We're going to move to safety. We're going to move to efficiency, productivity. We want to study the number of miles that we're driving in between every stop, the total miles driven between routes. Why is Route 1 driving 67 miles on average and all the other routes are driving 120 miles on average? Can we move customers around and service them differently and get a different, more effective and efficient result out of our fleet operation? Number 2 is we need to, so that's the management side. Number 2 is we need to train the drivers. And, for over 20 years, people have been asking me, well, what about Big Brother? What about Big Brother? Big Brother's a part of it. That's why we do it. Whether you fill out a service ticket or, I call you and say, hey, where are you? Yeah, that's Big Brother. As a business who is paying a wage, who is putting you in a company vehicle with your brand on it, you have absolutely every right to know where your vehicle is, how it's being used. Is it being used in a safe manner? Is it being maintained effectively? Is it being brought in for service when the engine light comes on? Or is it being abused or used after hours? All of those things are part of that process. But the goal here is not to turn over the drivers. We don't want to do that because that's very costly. It's costly in training time and paying out on PTO and things like that. We don't want to see that. What we want to do is let drivers know what the standard is, give them the opportunity to make that change, and they don't need weeks to make a change, right? You don't have to tell somebody, hey, you've got 2 weeks to stop driving your vehicle after hours, or you've got 2 weeks to stop speeding. No, you've been told, and it ends today, right? Maybe you give them one exception to that if it's not too extreme, like, oh, hey, look, you forgot you were going 80 and a 70. We talked about that. And one of the things, actually, one or two of our devices will actually beep at the driver. So you can set an audible feedback mechanism to coach the driver when they're creating some type of exception. And by training the driver to know, hey, when you hear that beep, guess what? An exception's been generated back here, and somebody's going to be looking at that. So when you hear it beeping at you nonstop, when you hit 77 miles an hour, guess what? You better think that's the threshold that we have set as an organization. You need to back down below 77, so you're okay. And you can also do, a certain speed above posted road speed. So by training the drivers on how the technology works, then they respond through the automated feedback mechanisms and awareness that they have about this. When I was, working with the pest control company back in the 90s, I had one on my vehicle, and I was never the type of guy that really messed around. But when I went into the convenience store to get my soda, my water, whatever it was for the day, I came back and I knew the GPS was in there, so I didn't waste any time. I got my stuff and I moved on to whatever I had to do next. Next is training others. What departments and department administrators or contacts need to know and get information out of the system? And it might be that the sales team needs to know how much time your lawn crew has spent within a subdivision to verify the pricing. Maybe it's initially estimated that the time spent in that subdivision will be 4,000 hours over the course of 6 months. And that's man hours for crews of, let's say, 3 guys that are taking care of this large area. And then you go back and you study that information, you find out actually we spent 4,500 hours in there, and in your agreement you have the leeway of increasing or decreasing the billables based on the actual hours that it takes to complete the job. So that would be sales. Human resources might be looking at it, if the vehicle goes home with the driver, when did the vehicle leave the driver's home and when did it get back to the home? And what are you paying for? Are you paying for the driver to start earning money from the time that he gets to the first job in the time that he leaves the last job, or is it time from the first job to the time that he gets home? That's something that you guys need to work out within your organization to find out what's fair and legal. But HR can go in there and they can look at that for payroll hours and wages and things like that and verify and spot check or look at information when the hours reported don't quite make sense. They can look in there and see what's going on. Risk and safety obviously can be looking for harsh braking, cornering, those types of exceptions, and then they can reach out to the branches and say, hey, look, truck 22 is having a problem with driving too fast or a lot of harsh braking. You need to coach them on starting to brake earlier because they've got 2,000 pounds of equipment in the back of the truck, and that type of behavior on a rainy road is going to lead to rear end accidents, and we know that, right? So getting the others involved, the other departments involved, is part of that process. And then measuring and modifying. So you've set these standards, you've engaged these people, you've trained to the standard. Now what you want to do is look at the data that's coming out of the system over a period of time, do your monthly reviews, and then once you've accomplished your goals, set new goals or set the bar higher in certain areas to see how far you can go to practically reduce expenses or improve efficiency and productivity. That process is the part of the process that's ongoing. It's also where we as experts in our field and having a business analyst can provide ongoing consulting with you to help you identify the things that you want to accomplish and how do you look at the data to get there. and then visit with you on a regular and ongoing basis. So that's the overall process that you really should be looking at and considering and discussing. Hopefully this will be the type of video that you will watch as a group before you get started, and then take some of this and then make it your own. But follow those general steps in this overall implementation process, and have a really successful deployment and find that return on investment just as soon as possible. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Have a great day.